Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? I'm hoping in a moment we should be going live on various chats. Let's make sure we're live on the right place. Offline and we're going online. We're online. Okay, good. Here's how it's going to work, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're doing a live episode of the Savage Snowflake Podcast. So very shortly, I'm going to be inviting comedian and writer Andrew Doyle via Zoom. Andrew Doyle, that's sick.
A new legend joins the Leaches.
Thank you very much for joining the Leaches. I just realised that's going to have to come off during the stream. Otherwise, that's still going to make sounds though, isn't it? Son of a bitch, it's a son of a bitch. Doobie-doobie-doo. I wonder if I can turn that off, or whether that just has to stay up there the whole podcast episode. Fuck. Maybe I can turn off my Streamlabs or something. Is there a way to do that? Anyway, yes, you're all watching just setup at the moment. So I'm going to be setting myself up. I'm going to invite Andrew in. Then we're going to start the podcast off. If you don't know who Andrew is, he's a very, very funny gentleman who has started a satirical parody Twitter account called Titania McGrath, who is the wokest woman in the world. And it's basically making fun of people's kind of, virtue signaling and false wokedom, etc., etc. But I find it's very, very funny. Played Warzone for the first time today. Had to rage quit because I'm shy. Dude, you get better. Trust me, it will happen over time. So first things first, I'm going to put the chat over here for a second, because chat will feature. But so if you've got questions for Andrew, make sure you get those lined up and ready. I'm just going to resize this chat over here. There you go. Great. So I can have chat over there. Intro and outro music there. And then we'll have video here. Podcast here. Okay, now I've got to just send him the invitation. Get the man in the chat. Get the man in the chat. You know how it goes. I sound like the hitchhiker. I sound like the bloody hitchhiker. Oh, I've already written down his social media apps. God, I'm so bloody clever. So bloody clever. Okay. Let me just do a little tweet out about this as well. Join me live right now. Join me right now for a live episode of the Savage Snowflake Pod, featuring comedian and writer Andrew Doyle, aka Titania McGrath, as we discuss overt wokeness, virtue, celebrity virtue signaling, and the craft of comedy writing. Right now at youtube.com/Jeff Leach TV. That's my website address. Okay, here we go. And tweets. And posts. I'm going to do that over on... going to pop that over on Facebook as well. And then I'm going to do one final post on my Facebook public page, sorry. Yeah, and once we've done that, then I'm going to invite him in and we'll get cracking with this bloody episode. This blooming episode. I think it's going to be a doozy. I can feel it. Okay, those of you just joining me and don't know what's going on, we're about to do a live episode of the Savage Snowflake Podcast. I'm just going to bring in my guest. Invitation, invite, email. default email. There we go. Please join me for blah, 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 blah. 2. Don't you? Is that correct? That's correct. Looks correct to me. And now let's just copy the invitation. There we go. Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Inviting him into the chat. Doing that through email right now. Okay. Should have an Andrew Doyle on the other end of the line at some point, and then I'm going to just bring his microphone, his camera in. Ready when you are. You do not. No, sir. Just emailed the invitation. Once you're in, I have to do a quick camera adjust, and then we'll get cracking. Yes! I say yes. What's up, Josh 2V? How are you, mate? Watching from Portsmouth, UK. Pompey? We got a Pompey boy in. Good to see you, man. Just waiting for my guest, and then we're going to do some resizing of his camera, and then that will be that. We'll get started. What's up, Mark D? How you doing, man? Savage Snowflake Podcast. About to go live. I'm inviting in Andrew Doyle, comedian and writer, responsible for the satirical parody account, Titania McGrath on Twitter, which if you're not following her, you need to. 500,000 followers and counting every day. I think in this time as well, this period of political lunacy, it makes sense. I can't stay. Wish I could stick around Vancouver, Canada. Mark D, you can stay. Where the fuck do you have to go? You're in Canada, bro. It's morning in Canada. What on earth are you doing in Canada right now that demands your attention more than this episode of the podcast? Titania is too close to reality. Barely parody nowadays. Well, that's the best kind of parody, isn't it? When you don't know if it's real or not. And that's where the humor's come from. The fact that 9 times out of 10, those tweets, you don't know if it's real or not. Hello, Andrew. How are you? Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, got you now.
Amazing. Look at that. So
how are you doing?
I like your veritable library behind you. That's pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's either that or a plain wall.
So I like that your background says I'm incredibly well read. My background says I haven't grown up beyond a 14-year-old boy yet.
Yeah, I mean this is all fabric. This isn't even real books. It's just cardboard cutouts
inside,
just to give the impression,
pornography.
Yeah, how are you?
Inside. I'm very well, thank you, mate. Good to connect with you. I'm sorry
you're in LA, aren't you?
Dark. I am based in LA now. Yeah. Yep,
yeah. When did you go out there?
2 years. I moved to 2 years ago. I moved to Los Angeles, but 4.5 years ago I moved to America. So prior to that, I was living. Let me see if I can bump up my brightness. Oh, that's the wrong camera. Just thought then you can actually see me. I moved out to the US 4.5 years ago now. So
right,
and they seem to be doing so well out here.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Can you hear me all right and everything? And
I can hear you wonderfully. Yeah. I'm gonna just drag your camera over to. So basically, I'm doing this live on. We haven't started yet. Just so you know, this is not the official start. I will do a little intro. I got to thank some patrons who've joined us. I got to do a little shout out for our sponsor, and then I'll bring you in. But I'm just gonna bring your camera feed over here and pop it in the old OBS studio. So let's display. Yeah, we can just grab that whole display. That works for me. Okay. Boop, and then I need to resize you. Not you. I need to resize the feed.
If you could, that would be great.
I'm going to give you some beautiful, just some beautiful thick thighs. That's what.
Yeah, that'd be nice, isn't it?
That's what guys are into nowadays. That's the guys and girls. You know, that's the internet these days.
Yeah, I've got to get into the thick thigh thing.
You're going to have to work on your thighs, Andrew. I didn't want to start the podcast on a downer like that, but
no, but everyone knows it. Everyone's saying it.
It's one of the biggest gripes people have with most of your comedy work is.
Yeah,
I like his style. I just feel like the thighs could be a little more curvaceous. All right, I'm going to kick off in just a second, mate. I'm just going to do a little intro at the top, And then, then I'll bring you in. So I'm just going to mute you for
Brilliant.
1
How
second,
long do you
so-
want to talk?
We do 1 hour straight through. 1 hour straight through. We're already actually broadcasting live on YouTube and Facebook, just so you know as well.
Yeah.
So I do broadcast it out live, and then I also record it, and then I'll upload the audio as a separate file and the video as another file. And I'm assuming you're pretty comfortable talking about anything and everything. We're not going to be delving into your personal life in any kind of awful way. It's
I mean, there's nothing that fascinating in my personal life anyway.
That's a shame.
To
That's
be
a
honest.
shame. Well, I'll spend less time on the so where did it all begin, Andrew? Questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll just go straight through for an hour. And if there is anything whilst we're talking that you go, I'd really rather not talk about that, just say that, and we'll move on.
Yeah.
I won't push on anything. But I haven't, like I say, this is not an expose podcast. It's
But you could do some of those gotcha questions that people like to do.
Oh, really? Like as like what? I'll deliver them as if I haven't heard you say them.
As like, oh, you said this in this interview.
Oh, no, I'm not going to do that shit. Yeah. I'm going to take this one snippet of your conversation out of context and then try and pick you apart because of it. No, I'm not going to do that. They do that. As you know, I'm a stand-up too. That happens to me on a weekly basis on the internet. People go, oh, well,
I mean, who hasn't said stuff they regret, right?
Andrew, it's not even about what I've said. It's about the fact that apparently because I appear as the libtard, the resident libtard cuck guest on Compound Media, for instance, which is a big network in the US, which is owned by Anthony Cumia, who used to the Opie and Anthony show on Sirius XM years ago. They were basically Howard Stern. It was Howard Stern and them with a shock jocks. But because he's been had a couple of run-ins over potentially being a reasonably right-wing, very conservative. Has certainly been accused of being a racist. Which is not something that I would ever support, outside of
one would hope not.
Yeah, no, because I'm not a piece of shit, but also, but by appearing on his radio show or on his online show a number of times to present, a different viewpoint. Anyway, we can talk about this on the podcast, really.
We will, because all of that guilt by association stuff is pretty much. I get that an awful. I can empathise there.
There you go.
Just is it okay that I can hear you? Mm-hmm. Is that messing up the sound?
No, it's perfect. Yeah,
fine. Because I don't have headphones that work well.
No, it's great. I'm not actually hearing it back. So your speakers are at a lovely level. All right, mate. I'm just going to mute you for 1 second, and then I shall bring you in when we kick off.
Cool.
All right, 1 sec. All right, ladies and gents, we're going to get kicked off over here. What's up, Bryson? How are you? Jiggles, good to see you, mate. Mark D, I'm glad you're sticking around. We can't wait to see your guest. Oh, we can't see your guest. You won't be able to see the guest yet. Our guest is here. Now you can see him. Okay, right. Intro. Let's do this. Do.
Savage.
Hello, one and all. How are you, savages? It's Jeff Leach here. Papa Jeff. Your best friend, your orator, your teacher, your diligent student. A guy just presenting some ideas to you that maybe you go, oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I never really looked at it that way. Or maybe just a lovable twat in a shirt that has no sleeves. I'm all of the above. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode. I think we're on episode 109 now of the Savage Snowflake Podcast. Kicking it off, and the support since this coronavirus. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of people are having a bad time right now with corona, and I'm very sorry for all the myriad of deaths and illnesses and loved ones currently in a perilous situation. But for me, the patronage support has been exceptional. So I got to say thank you for that. Thanks for making something very miserable into something quite happy. In fact, I'm going to kick off by just saying a very quick thank you to all of these wonderful new patrons: Darth Playdar, Anna Sadler, Melanie Spatola, Savannah Marie, Anna Fatlowitz, Alexandra Walters, Matt Aronson, Decodic, Lady JD, Damone Motton, Patrick Douglas, Miller Gendraff, Captain Cleanup, Peter Jagged, Chad Lawrence, Sigaro, Margerson, Myrtle, Cassie Hartwig, and of course Seth Thompson. Jeez Louise. And big shout out especially to Dan Lloyd and Siggy Riggy, the $50 patrons a month. I appreciate you very much indeed. Good to have you guys on board. Thank you very much as well to our sponsor, CB Deeper, continuing to support the podcast even in this time of need. If you haven't yet tried CBD products, give them a go. Very relaxing. Will help you out with your anxiety, might make you feel good, or might just make you feel a little bit more chill in this time of, untold pressure and stress and anxiety. Check them out, cbdeeper.com. They got a whole load of different products over there, including these wonderful vape cartridges. Now, I know what you're wondering. Oh, are they safe? 'Cause I heard some things about vapes. Every single one of their vape cartridges is lab tested at CannaSafe to prove there is no vitamin E, no harmful metals, no heavy metals or harmful pesticides in any of their products. And on top of that, if you use code SAVAGE at checkout, that's SAVAGE, SAVAGE, you'll get 10% off every single order. Check them out. cbdeeper.com is the website you want to check out, and support our supporters so we get supported by them. That's how it works. Yeah, it's a lovely little round circle of loving. Now, joining me today on the podcast is a gentleman whose face you might not instantaneously recognize. He's a comedy writer, a comedian from the UK, but on top of that, he's also responsible for a face that you probably will recognize from social media. The account on Twitter called Titania McGrath, who is well, how I always saw her, which I think is what she's intended to be, a satirical parody of the wokeness of the liberal left and virtue signaling of celebrities in our modern age. He's the man behind that. Welcome. Lovely to have you here. How are you, Andrew Doyle?
I'm all right. Jeff. How are you?
I'm very well, man. I'm pleased to have you on because I've been enjoying. I think it's very strange. Just in myself, I've had so much support over the coronavirus period so far.
Yeah.
I feel like your character, Titania, has become so much more important over the last few months to everyone's need to laugh at the lunacy that's going on in the world.
Yeah, the trouble with the coronavirus epidemic is that, she can only really make comments about that at the moment. People aren't really interested in much else. So it's so I'm not tweeting as frequently at the moment, just because I don't want to overkill,
Now, I should say Titania McGrath is not the only character that you, even though she is you behind the, you are behind the scenes of Titania, you're the puppet master there. You've also written for Jonathan Pye as well, who, if anyone has seen his hilarious videos outside the Houses of Parliament in the UK, picking apart our political system and damning it in a kind of brass-eye-esque fashion, I feel like all the day-to-day. He reminds me very much of Chris Morris style humor, and you've been responsible for a lot of his work as well.
Yeah, I co-wrote that with Tom, who plays the character, for 3 years. So that was from, God, when did that start? That was December 2015 till January last year.
Right.
So 3 years on that. And then I sort of focused on Titania, because that's only been, 2 years? Something like that, or less. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, she's reasonably new as a comedy concept for you.
Relatively, but I imagine it's not the sort of character that can go on indefinitely, is it? It's very much of the time. So God knows how much longer that will keep me busy. I always like moving on to other stuff, though.
I mean, she could have like a full 180 roundabout change herself. She could, instead of becoming a trans man, she could maybe become a trans conservative or something of that sort. Maybe.
No, I'm thinking she could go full conservative, like a trad wife, like get married, something like that. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. You can do anything with her.
I mean, we were just talking just before we started recording this. We were talking about the fact that just by association, I've sort of watched with interest, and I won't. I'm never gonna lie and say that I've dug so deep into all the interviews you've done or all the appearances on various TV shows.
Glad you haven't.
No, well, I don't do that for two reasons. One, because haven't got the fucking time to do that, if I'm honest. That's one thing. I'm going to be honest, to do that for every guest. And two, also, I think I don't want to have any kind of preconceived notion about who my guests are or what their process of creation is. And I think that your character would be so... Titania certainly has been so divisive because a lot of people don't know how to laugh anymore. Yeah. That we were talking about being guilty by association just by creating a character like that. Now people are going, well, what's your real motives, Andrew? What are you doing? And what do you believe?
There's a lot of that, isn't there? It's good not to have preconceptions about this stuff. I think because we haven't. I think we've met before. We have met once in Edinburgh.
Oh, bloody hell! Years ago.
You probably won't remember. I mean, that was many years ago. It was in Brooks Bar. If that rings any bells.
I remember Brooks Bar above the Gilded Balloon.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the good spot to be there. Who do we meet through?
Can't remember. You know what Brooks Bar is like. You know, people end up there very late at night.
Yeah.
And it's all a bit of a haze. But I do remember meeting you one year. I think.
I bet you hated me, Andrew.
No, I don't. It was so brief. I didn't have the time to develop the necessary hatred.
I have
for
the.
you. So,
Didn't have the time invested to really loathe me, as everyone should.
exactly. That's the benefit of short, sharp meetings.
I'm always nervous when I meet people who knew me from my start into comedy back in the UK, especially because I
Right.
think that for every, let me make a modest, hopefully accurate guess, but I'd say for every 2 or 3 people who thought I was nice and charming and funny and engaging, especially if you met me at Brooks Bar late at night drunk back when I was drinking, there would, at least for every 3 who liked me, there would be at least 1 or 2 people who thought I was a dick.
Yeah, but I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm really getting the impression that most of the antagonism between people, most of the animosity we feel for people is virtually always down to misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
And I think I've noticed that a lot. Like you say, the whole Titania McGrath thing has been so divisive, and so a lot of people have sort of decided things about me that are not true,
Right.
and they just sort of decide them and then make their statements online, and that's fine. They're free to fantasize as much as they want. But
what are some of the things that what are some of these assumptions they're making?
The assumption, a lot of them are to do with my politics. So
Right.
I get a lot of assumptions about. Well, firstly, when the news broke that I was Titania McGrath, there was a lot of anger about me being this straight white male. So there was this perception that I was heterosexual, which was an interesting one. And then that I was a Tory. That was another one, Conservative Party, who I've never ever voted for or supported. So there was another implication that I was from a private school posh background, which I'm absolutely not. So all of these things were just assumed.
You are
and
very. You have a lovely RP accent, though. You do sound
exactly.
educated. You're educated.
So I'm asking for it, really.
And you look pretty straight. Like you look like you're craving an exceptional amount of vagina right now. I'm gonna say.
Do I come across as straight acting? That's quite good.
Right now, I can see in your eyes. You're talking to me, but there's something in your eyes that's going, God, I wish he had breasts.
Oh, vagina craver. Okay, I didn't realize that's how I come across.
That's what you give off. Yeah, my gaydar is completely off. Another space right now.
But the thing about this stuff is what it's actually done is it made me realize how my perceptions of people have been so wrong for so long. I mean, it really has. I've ended up meeting a lot of the people that I used to loathe as sort of public figures.
Right.
And then I've ended up meeting them and discovering that those perceptions are almost always incorrect.
And almost always, I think, based out of our own insecurities.
Sure, exactly. And I was doing a lot of projecting onto them, and also that assumption that if people aren't politically exactly on side, then they must have some kind of evil quality to their character, as opposed to just disagreeing. So that's something. You get it a lot in America, obviously. But the assumption of a particular, I have to say, this is a problem particularly on the left, is the assumption that conservatives are just diabolical figures.
Sure.
And
every single one of them is a racist and a homophobe and a misogynist.
Or that they don't care about poor, but they want to give tax breaks to the rich in order to kill off the poor, that kind of, as opposed to this idea that, if you give tax breaks to the rich, there'll be a trickle down effect and actually it will benefit poor people. That would be the more generous interpretation of that. But people naturally go for the most negative characterization that they can. And there's something in human nature that does that. So I'm not surprised by it. But like you say, you get it a lot, particularly if you're seen talking to someone who's perceived to be unpopular. It's like being back at school, and then you become sort of tainted and stigmatized by the association of being next to or within spitting distance of a certain individual, or being interviewed by.
You got to look at these. How the press does that now is just to drag up an old photo of one celebrity at some kind of London Fashion Week event, standing next to a celebrity who 10 years ago was loved by everyone, but now is the subject of hatred for whatever horrendous thing they've done.
Right.
And they'll go, look at Kim Kardashian hanging out with so and so at this too. And don't get me wrong, I'm not part of the Kim Kardashian fan club, but I look at that and I go, oh come on, the girl was at she'd go to the opening of an envelope.
Like I've spoken to famous people who get famous people, as you know, are always asked for selfies with people, and I just think this is one of the reasons I'm glad I'm not in that position, because you don't know who that person you're standing next to. It could be a serial killer, it could be the Beast of Jersey or something. You don't know who, and they've got their arm around you, and I see that happening quite a lot. Like, oh, you shared a platform with. You mean I had a conversation with? That's okay. You don't sort of catch their views by osmosis or something.
There you go.
It's a really weird development. This is a relatively new thing, I think, as well.
It is, but I agree with you that I think, and look, I think we should probably set the tone of maybe just for the listeners, how we actually feel versus what is being projected onto us.
Fine.
For
Yeah,
instance,
of
this
course.
podcast is called The Savage Snowflake because I've been, since I moved to America, I was incredibly left when I first arrived here, incredibly liberal and very progressive. And I still consider myself a classic liberal and very progressive in my outlook on life. I'd like to see everyone treated equally, irrespective of race, gender, and sexuality. However, I also hate over political correctness, and I think that's one of the killers of unifying factors, when people can laugh and share stories about themselves that are funny, or about their their cultural group, and do that in such a way as to stop this segregated demonization of each other, and rather just go, oh, that is funny. Yeah, white people don't season their food very much. It's all right, I brought my own hot sauce. Or, yeah, black people, I mean, maybe we'll go to the cinema, but maybe, you got to promise me you're not going to talk throughout the whole thing. Do you know, like, now those things are gross racial stereotypes, but they come from a basis that is not, I don't think, designed to hate someone. It's right. More designed to mock. And that's, growing up in East London, that's how we did it. People took the piss out of each other.
I assumed that you were coming from that sort of basic fundamental liberal value. I just made that assumption. It might be more interesting if you were a raging Nazi or something like that. But
I'm not blonde enough for a start, but I think
I didn't do my research there. But yeah, that has to be the baseline assumption, doesn't it? I mean,
but this is the thing. I used to think that way, and I don't know about yourself if you've changed over the last few years. But I now consider myself a left-leaning moderate, because a few years ago, at least a year and a half, 2 years ago, I made the decision, as we spoke about before the podcast, I would appear quite regularly on a network called Compound Media, owned by Anthony Cumia, and he's been associated with very right-wing views or very conservative, and I go on there to joke and to make people laugh and to present ideas that are different to the ideas of the other people on the panel, because through that conversation is how we learn to fucking understand each other, and how we hopefully come out of it with a better understanding of each other's viewpoints, rather than just going, nah, you're a fucking right-wing piece of shit and you're a fucking liberal cuck snowflake, and that's why I'm the resident snowflake on there, and that's how this podcast, that certainly wasn't the birth of this podcast, but that's why it's called what it is,
Right. No, I understand. I mean, I guess there's an added complication in that liberal means something different in the UK than it does in the US, doesn't it?
Right. Okay,
so that,
yes.
When we talk about liberal values in the UK, we're talking about things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, individual autonomy, those
orgies.
kind of. Sorry.
And orgies.
And but that goes without saying. But that's more libertarian.
Really? Well, that'd be orgies by individual houses. Like you can't have an
libertarians.
orgy.
I don't really like orgies and white.
No national orgies, just individual postcode orgies.
Am I right in thinking that in America, when you say liberal, what you really mean is sort of left-leaning or Democrat?
Yeah, certainly. Left-leaning means it's almost. I think liberalism has become bastardized. All of these terms have become bastardized, and that's the worry. Is now when. Like you say, when I used to say I'm a liberal, it just means that I want to see people treated equally and fairly, and I'm all for progressive thought. And now it's like, no, it means you fucking hate conservatives. And
basically, most people, the vast majority of people, believe in equality and treating people fairly. They just have different ideas about what's best for society. That's what it boils down to. So you could eliminate all of this mudslinging and Twitter scrapping that goes on if people just assumed the best intentions of the people they were talking to. It would be so simple. It is really that simple.
I wonder if since you started doing the Titania McGrath character, have you had to, and also Jonathan Pye, actually, I mean, he's so deeply entrenched in the world of politics. I mean, that's literally what the character is.
Yeah.
Have you had to, were you always a big fan of the dialogue of politics, or did you have to bone up, for one of American phrase, bone up on your politics now that you were doing this and go, I really need to know, with some kind of depth the background to what I'm making, I'm mocking and satirizing, so that if I'm ever picked apart in an interview, I can back up my thoughts.
Well, in fact, with Jonathan Pye, the reason I ended up writing with Tom on that is because I was so interested in politics. I already had an interest in it, so that's one of the reasons why he wanted to write with me, because Tom wasn't so interested in politics. So actually, what you've just said more applies to him, I suppose, that he had to then read more about it and get more interested in it over the period of time that he was doing it. It was already an interest for me. And then the Titania thing's more about culture, isn't it? It's more like about the what they call the culture war, whatever that is, So it's just a different target. But because the left currently is so invested in the culture war from a kind of intolerant aspect, it means that Titania ends up satirizing the left more than the right, whereas Jonathan Pye was definitely mocking the right more than the left. The positive side of that is I've seen it from both sides. The people get very angry when firstly, people get really angry if your brand of comedy isn't to their taste, but they get even angrier if it's got a political slant.
Absolutely.
You know, so I've seen the kind of anger from the right and the left in kind of equal measure. Although I have to say, it's generally been worse from the left. I don't know what that says.
No, dude. This is why I consider myself a left-leaning moderate now, because I become so disillusioned with what used to be, overt democratic thought process has now become so bastardized. Like, Antifa and these kind of organizations.
So, I mean, that sort of thing's the real extreme, but there's a general, from quite mainstream leftist figures, there's a general viciousness about the way they speak to their political opponents, which is something that I think there's a real problem with the left, because that ensures that we keep losing. That's what that does.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, when Boris Johnson was diagnosed with coronavirus last week, the level of venom from otherwise normal left-leaning people talking about how they hope he dies and how great, and gloating about this thing, and you point to that and you think, look, people on the right can now point at that and say, with some justification, you don't have the moral high ground here.
Yeah.
You're not the humane people, and it wouldn't matter so much if they weren't the same people who talk about how compassionate and loving they are and put out the "Be Kind" hashtag, when actually they're the most vicious, venomous people online. So if you want to be persuasive, and if you're serious about wanting the left to at least have a credible opposition to those in power, then you need to be you need to improve your game. I mean, identity politics and the woke movement has made the left in the UK virtually unelectable. That's what it's done because of its viciousness.
That's the same in America. I mean,
right.
Like the only person, or the only figurehead, I guess, of that kind of very progressive school of thought would be someone like Bernie Sanders, and even Bernie is. I like a lot of his policies. Unfortunately, he's so unelectable because Americans just see him. He's a socialist to Americans, which he's not. He doesn't believe in socialism, but they think he's a communist. They think he's a socialist.
He's certainly the more socialistic of the candidates. He's certainly more to the left than the other candidates, and but he has dabbled in the woke stuff, and and when Elizabeth Warren talks about how she's going to get a 9-year-old transgender child to veto her Secretary of Education, the voters look at that and think, yeah, I can't afford to feed my family. Why are you talking about that? What's going on? These kind of the mismanaged priorities that alienate voters.
Now, is this just the political parties that are responsible for this, do you think, or is it more directly due to social media and media and news outlets pushing certain facets of what it is to be left and what it is to be right? Because it's more interesting to watch two people warring than it is two people having a reasonably balanced discussion.
That's a very good point, but that's always been the case. I mean, politics has always been about conflict to a degree. What I think this is, I mean, if you look at like Nye Bevin, he described the Conservatives as worse than vermin back in the day, So this is something that has always been there, and there has always been this ad hominem approach to politics, which has never been effective, by the way. But something's happened since around 2012, 2013, and it's what it is the culture war becoming mainstream. Like, there's always a culture war going on, like in the hinterland. There's always that. It's always on the fringes. What's happened over the past sort of 7 or 8 years is the culture war has sort of been relocated to become mainstream, so that now it wins and loses elections. It's at the heart of everything, and that's why I don't want to have to be talking about all this stuff. It really bores me. But it's become so important. No, it's become so important because it's infected politics to such a degree. So the best example is the Labour Party, who, since Jeremy Corbyn decided to stand down, he will eventually, by the way, in about 2 days' time. You've had things like the Dawn Butler, an MP, talking about how you are not born with a biological sex. You've had candidates for the leadership talking about how they might consider rejoining the EU, completely undermining the democratic vote that took place. Jeremy Corbyn even started announcing his pronouns during his last election. But they did all this stuff that alienates people that no one cares about.
Well, they think it's speaking to their own demographic.
Well,
excuse me. Sorry.
because Labour has become so obsessed with its middle class party membership base, and it forgot about its
Working class.
working class base, basically. Yeah. So there is. So that's what I mean. Is that I think it's to do with. It's more to do with the idea of the culture war seeping in. And what I'd like to see is that to be done. I'd like to see the culture war, which will always be going on in one form or another. I'd like to see it pushed back to the margins. So it's just the people on the extremes of the left and right screaming at each other on Twitter, and we can just ignore them, get back to ignoring them.
Right.
But we can't do that when the mainstream parties and candidates and politicians are deeply invested in it. We can't do it when HR departments around the country are bullying their staff in terms of what they can and cannot say. We can't do it when the police are investigating and arresting people for what they say. All of this stuff, it means that it does have a major impact on our life, and it shouldn't. The culture war should be on the periphery.
How do you feel about American society and politics? Because a lot of what you seem to be talking about is look, people should have their God or not God-given right, whatever, depending on your religious beliefs, but their right to free speech and to be able to express themselves without fear of being, like you say, arrested or demonized or categorized as one thing if they just have a thought about something in the culture war. Do you see that? I mean, America has always been a huge proponent of being American, is freedom to, freedom of speech. That's what sets America apart from every other country in the world. We've always supported that, which doesn't seem to be something that exists anymore in this country. But do you
really?
like the American model? Well, I mean, people are doing it, but it doesn't seem to make a difference in terms of the vitriol. I mean, people lose their jobs over things they say. They lose their livelihoods, and I'm saying on both sides of the camp there. That's
because of the cancel culture. So it's a kind of mob pressure. I mean, obviously, in any capitalist society, any company is going to respond to negative public pressure if they feel they're going to lose money. So that's why cancel culture works. But you do. So that's the negative side. But on the plus side, you do have the First Amendment, and we have absolutely. We've got an unwritten constitution. We don't have anything like that here. So you do have that protection. That said, there are now rumblings in America. There are groups in America who have openly advocated for the idea of the First Amendment to be amended. So to not include what they call hate speech, which is basically defined by whoever is in power at the time.
Sure.
So that is a real problem. Someone mentioned to me recently about how the ACLU, they have sort of changed. They used to be diehard, will support anyone's right to say absolutely anything, and there's a sense in which the cracks are sort of appearing in that. So that, I think it is a worry, but I do think the American system, as far as the First Amendment, is a better system than what we've got. Because, for instance, in America, people aren't going to be arrested for jokes or indeed offensive comments they say online. In our country, that happens all the time. So, I mean, people are investigated for non-crime here, So, past 5 years, there have been 120,000 investigations by the police for non-crime hate incidents.
Right.
That isn't something that would happen in America.
No, you're right.
But there are downsides to America as well.
Oh, I mean, there's plenty of those. Trust me. It's very interesting because I mean, like,
you haven't got health insurance, that's not good.
No, absolutely, yeah, especially not right now. I feel so out of touch with British politics. I've done barely any keeping up with it beyond the Brexit votes and all of the lead up to that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't really know what the state of the UK is in these days.
Well, I reckon the coronavirus will make a big difference to things. I mean, my hope is that it'll put an end to the culture war stuff, as in, because when you've got each side squabbling about identity, stuff to do with identity politics, which most people don't really care about, this kind of thing where you have an actual global crisis, it kind of refocuses things a little bit, it puts things into perspective. That would be the hope. And yet, I've seen so much stuff online now that they're really fighting back. They're really doubling down. They're talking about diversity in Donald Trump's coronavirus task force. They're talking about criticizing the health service for claiming that trans operations are non-essential, which they don't mean not important. They mean not life-threatening during a time of a pandemic, and how coronavirus operates as whiteness and all sorts of, how it's a gendered crisis. There was the Australian senator said it's a gendered crisis that disproportionately affects women, even though most of the fatalities are male. So there are people weaponizing the coronavirus for identitarian reasons. So it's still happening.
Right.
But I want to think that it all put an end to it. It may be where, I don't know if you've noticed this as well. Like, I've seen the viciousness level has escalated. Like, it's most of us would not dream of going online, finding someone we disagree with and saying, you're a fucking nasty, ugly, fucking, it wouldn't occur to us.
No.
Those people on the so-called compassionate left who do that, who completely dehumanize people and yet think they're the good guys, I've noticed an escalation in their vitriol since the coronavirus started. And I wonder, it's just a theory, but I wonder.
Now, are these like, are you talking about kind of celebrity figures or popular political
Some
figures? Or
Yes, some celebrity figures.
Let's say public figures. Public figures,
activists, but also the ones with the kind of, the pronouns in their bio, which is meant to signal to the world what good people they are. But 9 times out of 10, they're the most nasty online. Not all, I should emphasize that.
Sure.
But the majority. So I've noticed this, and I wonder whether it's because they're sensing that their movement is over, as they're sensing that no one cares about you bleating about LGBTQIA plus issues, whether there should be an extra Q in there, an extra, like no one cares whether there should be extra
right
stripes.
Now they're more worried about whether or not grandma's going to fucking make it through the summer.
Right, exactly. If you take the example of the gay rainbow flag, when Philadelphia Pride in 2017 added a black and brown stripe to the rainbow gay flag, and they did that because they said it wasn't sufficiently racially inclusive. As though the rainbow flag was meant to be representative, a literal representation of the skin colors that are acceptable in the gay community.
Yeah.
Right. So
well, to be fair, there are a lot of gay people in the purple community.
There are a lot of purple gay people, a lot of bright red gay people. But that's the thing about that stuff is like 99% of us look at that and think, what a bunch of tossers. Most of us don't give a shit about that. And it's a tiny fraction. But the problem is those people who care about that stuff, they are in all those HR departments I mentioned. They're in the government. They're in the law. They're in the education. They run the university.
They're in popular media. I mean, there's a huge amount of those people in entertainment. I don't know if you're aware of an American comedian. I use this guy as a reference point quite a bit. But Andrew Schultz. I don't know if you know Andrew Schultz, a stand-up comedian who
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with his work.
No worries. He's got a couple of podcasts, the Brilliant Idiots podcast and Flagrant podcast, and he's now. He's a great example of someone who makes jokes that are certainly wouldn't be considered politically correct. He's not hateful or demonizing of any particular group. His fan base is full of people of all different types. Sexuality, racially, culturally, gender divide. There's men, there's women, there's gay, there's straight, there's black, there's white. There's everyone in his audience. But he will shit on anyone for the sake of a good joke. He will make jokes about everyone and every facet of every person's existence. He had quite a big success as a stand-up live. Was on a couple of failed pilots, for TV shows. Was on a show called Guy Code on MTV that was successful. That's what got him a fan base. And then he made a special, shot it, I'm assuming with money he made from his various failed pilots, and then tried to sell it everywhere. No one wanted it. They were like, this does not match. Effectively, they just went, look, this is not fucking PC, woke, progressive, liberal left, or enough for any of our networks.
That's why it matters, isn't it?
Well, exactly. Absolutely. And outside of that, this man is not a hateful, right-wing, abhorrent racist. He's anything but that. But because his jokes make fun of sexuality or of racial differences or of cultural differences or of gender stereotypes, not in a hateful, demeaning, nasty, I fucking hate you black people or I hate you women kind of way, but more in like, I mean, listen, women whinge about this shit and like, I get it, guys are fucking dicks and stuff. Some of you are bitches. Like just, I'm obviously diluting very much the premise of any of his jokes.
Although what you did just there was pretty funny.
But you know what I mean? It's just that idea of just going, hey, look, and vice versa. And dicks sometimes, guys.
Jokes, in other words.
Guys, jokes. Like, hey, dudes, you got to wash your dick. It smells. Like, we know this about men. Like, so because of that, they didn't want to put it on any network. So he released it in segments on YouTube, and he got millions of views. And then he has built an entire network now off the back of that. And has wildly successful podcasts. He's been on Joe Rogan a number of times. He's in with all those guys now. He's very desired by everyone.
Well, because artists can circumvent the old gatekeepers now. That's the thing. So, but I reckon that will change, because within the arts, as you say, like it's massively taken over the arts and TV commissioners and that kind of thing. But the new generation that's coming up, the youngest people, they're sick of it all. So something might shift eventually, probably will, and
Do you
maybe.
think, so is it millennials? Is it people? I'm assuming we're roughly the same age. I'm 36, so.
No, I'm older than you. So I'm
Okay.
I'm 41. So I'm just into Generation X.
Gen
and
X,
you're a millennial. And
is it our fault? Is it millennials' fault? Are we the people that are currently making those decisions that are?
Because it's always been a minority of any generation. I think most of the real kind of sensorial stuff I've seen has come from my generation. And most academics are more in my kind of generation. But so when we talk about millennials, and that it doesn't make any sense, because millennials are pretty old now. And like when you talk about generation
whoa, easy, Andrew, easy.
Well, come on.
I got a playing age of 28. All right, let's. In America,
Generation Z, what we would say, Generation Z in America, like and they're the ones who are reacting very vocally against this kind of
overt wokeness or
wokeness or whatever. Yeah. So I think it's always going to die a natural death anyway, because it never has the majority support, right? It's just surviving at the moment because the people in power are capitulating to it. And if maybe, I mean, this is, like I say, my hope is that faced with actual problems like the coronavirus, people will stop capitulating. It was never the problem of people complaining. It was the capitulation that was the problem. It's like when the what was it, Evergreen University, when all the students rounded on a professor and bullied him and shouted at him and all the rest of it. What the university authorities should have said is, okay, if you did that, you have to leave. You can't be a part of this university. That's not acceptable behavior. But they didn't. They capitulated to that behavior. Mm-hmm. So but that might stop now, and people might start to understand what actual hardship means. What because they throw that word oppression around an awful lot, but very few of us are oppressed in any meaningful sense.
Absolutely.
There is prejudice, and there is discrimination, and there is homophobia and racism and sexism, and no one is denying that. No one is denying that, and no one is suggesting that's a good thing either. Well, some are, but they're dicks on the fringes.
Well, actually, I'm going to play devil's advocate 1 second.
A
small number of people are denying that, especially in America. This is,
I
started dating, a woman of color about just over a year ago. And it's really since I've started to be in a relationship in this country with a woman of color. I've dated black girls in England, but I've really started to see how in America, there are people who walk around just going in this country, say, racism doesn't exist. That's all made up. But it's because of a lack of education. They are so poorly educated.
It's palpably absurd, for one thing.
I know.
Particularly in America, with based on the history of America.
But that's the point. They're not taught their own history. Their own history is denied to them, so they're uneducated, and they're probably living in.
That's a distinction. I couldn't think of anyone in the UK who is saying racism doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I couldn't think of anyone. No one that you would take seriously.
Sure.
The neo-Nazis in their basement are I mean, actually, normally even they don't say racism doesn't exist. They proudly declare themselves to be racist. So I mean, I don't think that's so much of a problem here. But what I would say is that in trying to detect racism where it doesn't exist in order to advance an agenda, that in itself creates a more racist society. So that's why things such as unconscious bias and the idea that if you're studied in critical race theory, you can detect the power structures that shape and dominate society. All of that sort of stuff is bound to generate resentment and divide us all up and segregate us further. So that stuff is bad. The standard liberal approach to this stuff is tackle racism when it exists, not where you imagine it to be, right? And that's something that I think we could do a lot more of.
Yeah. Has the current state of overt wokeness and this capitulation that you reference quite a few times?
Yeah.
Has this affected your work, your business? Because, like you say, as soon as people found out Titania McGrath was a white man, and I like how they already decided your sexuality for you, and
but you notice they don't use that anymore. Like they just straight white male, and then they discover I'm not straight. White male, and they pretend they never said that. because it doesn't fit into the narrative they wanted to play.
Surely now you join the ranks of someone like Milo Yiannopoulos, right? Because now you're not straight, but you're still white and you're still male and you're still desperately privileged. And
I mean, what does that? I've never seen myself as. I mean, I just say what I think about stuff, and that's it. And I think people will put their own spin on it.
I'm just saying that's what happens. I got asked to do Milo's show recently, and I actually turned it down because that's one association that I don't think I could ever appear on something that he does and convince him of any of my left-leaning ideologies. I don't think has any desire to explore those.
No, but by his own admission, he's a provocateur and narcissist, so his priority isn't sitting down and having a sensible conversation that you can get anywhere with.
Of course
you choose who you talk to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I would happily talk to anyone who I think would be interesting to talk to. So
I just think as soon as people find out that you're not a straight man, it's very easy to go, okay, well, sure, you might be gay, but then you're still this, you're still that. It's this application of certain labels because of the comedy you create.
Right, exactly.
Whereas if they looked at any of your other work prior to that, for instance, the Jonathan Pye, a body of work, they go, hang on a sec, this is so at such odds and such the opposite side of politics.
It's sort of inconvenient, isn't it? Well, like I say, people have their prejudices, and they enjoy their prejudices, and they don't like to see them shaken or challenged. So,
is there anything you hate about the creation of Titania? Is there anything you go, all right, well, I wish I could have done that differently from its inception, or I now just hate this element of the job? Because it is also a job. It is also a creative job that you're undertaking there.
I think I would have liked not to have been exposed, if at all possible. So I was outed. I didn't out myself. I was outed.
In more ways than one, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. There was something fun about doing a character where people didn't know who was behind it. There was something quite interesting about it.
How did that come out? Actually, who spilled the beans?
It was a combination. Well, so firstly, there's a journalist called Rosamund Irwin who works for the. I'm going to get this wrong, aren't I? I think she works for the Sunday Times, and she she'd done an investigation. She'd read a lot of my political articles, and she'd read an advanced copy of the book by Titania McGrath, and she worked out that there were some quotations that were similar or that crossed over. Right, I was using the identical sources, not much, but just a few times, and so she'd gone through all this. She'd phoned friends of mine to try and ask. Honestly, she'd really gone to town, like proper investigative journalism. It was really good. And then she emailed me saying,
she had pronouns in her Twitter description, out of interest?
I don't know. But I don't know where her politics comes from, actually. I haven't really looked into that. But either way, whatever her politics are, it's a pretty decent job that she did. And then she speculated. She wrote an article saying she thought it was either me or someone else called Lisa Graves, who was a friend of mine who's also a writer and comedian or satirical writer. And but then Chortle, Chortle is the UK comedy industry website run by Steve Bennett, and he somehow found a sort of the smoking gun. He found a book fair, a catalogue from a book fair in Frankfurt, where someone from my publisher had inadvertently put my name next to the book. So it was a mistake in-house in the publishing house, and he found it. And I don't know how he found it, but he found the smoking gun. So Rosamund Irwin had sort of done all the groundwork and done a really great job. And then
investigative journalism.
Yeah. And then Chortle had found the, absolute incontrovertible evidence. And by that point,
fucking Chortle, man, honestly.
So I admitted it at that point because the book was coming out that week. So the whole thing looked really orchestrated. It looked like I completely planned this because suddenly suddenly the story was that it was me who was her. And then there were lots of TV appearances and radio appearances and all that sort of stuff. So it looked like I deliberately engineered this in this way. I am not that smart to do that. I'm not that publicity savvy. It just happened like that, which was great.
I'm not sure if I believe that. However, I do believe you have that business acumen. I do believe you are smart enough to have come up with that concept. But I believe you if you say you didn't orchestrate it that way.
I honestly don't have very good business sense.
I also think, look, it's like God, the Twitter account for God. I'm still not maybe it has been outed who actually runs that, but
I don't know who.
I don't know who does it, and they've kept that very secretive. And I actually think, like you say, there's something wonderful about complete anonymity. And
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? I like it.
How do you build? I think this is more from a technical business acumen side of things. How do you build an account like that when you are keeping it completely anonymous? You're not saying, "Hey guys, go and check out this funny thing that I'm doing right now over on this other account."
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. How do you build that up? Sensationalist tweeting at celebrities, or
no, because I wasn't trying to make it popular. I was literally just doing it for myself to ridicule. You know, if you're gonna satirize this kind of person who goes online and spends their whole life on Twitter, stirring up stuff in the culture wars and interpreting everyone in the worst possible way and being really intolerant but calling themselves compassionate and judging everyone. The way to satirize that is through Twitter. Twitter isn't a natural home for me. It's not something that I would naturally gravitate towards. But with her, it had to be through the forum that they use. So I was doing it for myself, for my own entertainment, for my own satisfaction. I wasn't trying to build followers. It happened just by accident. As in, I was obviously producing something that people wanted to read. So I always think this is the best thing to do, like in terms of comedy, in terms of any artistic endeavor, is do whatever you want to do. And any kind of commercial success that comes about is always going to be an element of talent and ability, but largely it's going to be luck and in terms of the timing of what you do. But trying to anticipate the zeitgeist and build up success, I don't think generally works, because we always get that wrong. So
I agree with you that I think if you try and craft it too perfectly, then it tends to fall by the wayside. It needs to come from a place of, almost not flippant, but a very almost a calmer, more human approach, if for want of a better phrase. Even though
you just do, I did it because I wanted to do it, and because I found it was entertaining me, and it was a way to express my dissatisfaction with that particular movement.
Now, would you say she's actually been, though? It's been a good, even though it wasn't necessarily intended as that in its inception. Has Titania McGrath been a boon to your career, or has she been a nightmare to deal with?
There are pros and cons, aren't there? I mean, I don't know what because obviously she's not the only thing that I write, and she's not the only avenue that I have in terms of the stuff I produce. But certainly, because I was offered a book deal, two book deals. I've just finished a second book.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And then the tour and stuff like that. So then it does become a source of income as well. But of course, I'm a writer. I'm a comic and writer, so that makes sense.
Well, you have an actress now playing the character of Titania.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you going to preview that at Edinburgh this year?
So we did it in Edinburgh last year.
Sorry,
and then
I got my timelines.
The tour was meant to start next month, so that's not going to happen now. So we're actually postponing it probably till next year, to be honest.
Wow.
Till everything's calmed down, which means I'll almost certainly just write a new show. But I think if the character's still up and running, I mean, I think she'll have to develop. But I think that is a form of development, isn't it? Like making her alive is a way to keep it more interesting to me. Like I don't want to just keep it on Twitter.
I mean, look at someone, and I know this is a very different kind of character, but something like Keith Lemon, Lee Francis, Keith Lemon as a character. I know most of my American viewers who are tuned in now won't have ever heard of Keith Lemon, but he's a very successful TV host character back in the UK, who is created by an comedy actor called Lee Francis. But that is really, he started that as just a way to meet celebrities. He's like, I love celebrities, I love celebrity culture, I want to be friends with famous people. Why? And I'm kind of a fucking crazy super fan of all these people. Let me make that a character so I can do these things that I want to do, like sniff Kylie's panties and then just go, hey, it's me, Keith Lemon. I don't know what I'm doing. That's
the point, isn't it? That you end up just do what you want to do, and then sometimes something hits.
But he's now become that character has become something where he now is a celebrity. He now is able to make those people want to know him. And I wonder if in a very different way, because his is obviously very light, fluffy pop entertainment, whereas even though yours is intended as to be light and to be ridiculed and it's mocking the overt woke culture, virtue signaling, etc. She could almost become an orator for that movement, almost realizing some things about herself. There could be a really interesting story.
We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm looking into developing her further for something else, either radio, TV,
film. A feature film, dude.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? I mean, something like that might be quite good. I'm
sure the actress you selected for the show is incredible. So she could do. You could almost go a little what's it called, Sacha Baron Cohen, maybe even take the character almost like as a Borat character, but take her over to the US, or I can see a wonderful.
It's been mooted. That idea's been mooted. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do it. So yeah, I think overall there's loads of positives that come from having a character that resonates with people and enables you. You know what it's like. Our work is freelance. We create stuff, and some stuff makes us money and a lot of it doesn't. I mean, a lot of the stuff I write doesn't make me any money at all. So, but this helps to support the other stuff financially. So it's all good. So there's a lot of pros. The downside is the cons are, because of what I'm satirizing, and because I do write about politics and culture generally. It means that I've found myself in the midst of this kind of culture war that I don't really want to be a part of. But so there's that. That's the sort of downside of it.
Is there a lot of vitriol? Do you get sent nasty messages regularly? Or do you get any kind of threats or anything of that nature?
Yes, I do. And that is sort of part of the deal, isn't it? I suppose if you put yourself out there and people perceive what I'm saying is to be contentious, I don't think it is, but people obviously perceive that it is. So they're going to react badly like that. And again, but I'm still making the choice to do it. So, what are you going to do?
I mean, keep making jokes, hopefully.
Right, exactly. I mean, Twitter sort of becomes unmanageable after a certain point. When you've got a certain number of followers, it becomes unmanageable unless you start ignoring, mute and block all the people who are going to send you vitriol, because it's just not going to get anywhere. But and I'm not interested in that. Like, I care very deeply about politics and about cultural issues, and I want to talk to people who have different ideas about the world. But I'm not going to sit there and talk to you if you're just screaming insults at me, because that's what children do. It's what teenagers do when they're having a tantrum. So what's the point?
That's why when you see these videos like that one you mentioned of students on campus just screaming at people or going and kicking down, like, don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily want to see a Trump 2020 rally march, or I don't want to see a guy standing on a street corner telling me that that God is the only savior, and if you're a homosexual or if you're an artist, you're going to hell, whatever the fuck it might be. I don't want to see those people, but I also can make the decision just to go, those opinions are fucking crazy, and I'm going to choose to just ignore it and move on with my day and keep putting good opinions into the world. Yeah,
wouldn't it? It'd be great if we lived in a world where there weren't people standing on street corners shouting about how all homosexuals are evil, but they should be allowed to if they want, and I can move on and ignore that, and that's fine. Although when I was a kid, I used to find them fascinating. I used to sort of hang around and listen to what they had to say. I always knew it was ridiculous, but I found them very entertaining.
Was it harder coming out as a gay man or coming out as Titania McGrath?
Well, it's so. I don't think it's comparable, is it?
I mean, probably not, but it's still a fun question.
I
wonder what's had more of an overt impact on your life.
I mean, look, it's the thing is also my generation. It's sort of Generation X, like there were no out gay people at school when I was at school anywhere in the country. They just that just didn't happen. And we live in a culture now where young people are very open about being gay if they're gay, and so it's a totally different world in that school. But I remember when I was sort of early 20s, and I would tell people about how it's a no-brainer to me that we should have gay marriage. I never found anyone who thought that was people laughed at that. People thought that was ridiculous. But now you're seen as an utter reactionary monster if you don't think that. It's a very quick change. Everything's changed really, really quickly. And also coming from a Catholic background and not being very happy about being gay and trying to resist it for a long time, I would say that that's a more important, because I don't identify through sexuality. I don't understand why you would. I consider it like being right-handed or being 5'10" or being blue-eyed or something. Just being gay. It's like just something, an aspect of my character that I can't change, but I don't identify as it. It's not important to me as an identity.
Right.
It's just something I have no control over. And is incidental and boring even. But coming from the time when I grew up, it was a big deal. People were routinely being attacked, and so it was a totally different culture. So yeah, that's more impactful than, oh yeah, I wrote this fake Twitter account. I think that's more important.
What about your family and friends? Are they worried for you for creating this character? Do they? Because I always wonder when someone creates something that causes such a divisive response in an audience.
Just because friends and family of mine see the weirdly psychotic responses that she elicits every now and then. But what you've got to remember is those people are, firstly, they'd never say it to my face on the whole.
Mm-hmm.
They're hiding behind their keyboard. And secondly,
normally their picture is an anime. It's normally an anime picture.
Yeah, it's normally an anime thing.
Yeah.
But also, they're such a small minority of people. They're not representative of the population. Most people are decent. Most people are just nice, to be honest. The vast majority of people are just nice, boring, bland people, and that's great. Let's be honest about that. Like the people who scream at each other online, and it amplifies it, doesn't it? Like you go on, if you're on Twitter for a couple of days and you look at the if I took the vitriol I get literally, I would assume that we live in a world that is populated by utter sociopaths and monsters, but we don't. They're there, but they're on the fringes. It's just now they've got direct access to you, whereas before
I wonder whether social media is creating that. Whether it's creating more sociopaths. Yeah. I mean, look, we got a question here from one of the chat is saying, Jordan is saying, would there be room, do you think, for a no holds barred social media platform to emerge? No terms of service. Is that even possible in today's society? And if so, how long would it take for ISIS or the KKK to start recruiting on it? Is there a place to put all the crazy in one social media platform, or would that immediately get shut down by some kind of government agency?
But the problem is, I mean, if you're talking about criminal material like ISIS videos and paedophilia and stuff like that, you don't want that on the internet.
I guess we're talking overt free speech, a platform where you're overtly left wing Antifa member can go, you know what, fucking conservatives are a bunch of this.
Yes.
Put all the hate speech in one platform, and then we can kind of go, great, that's for that.
The speech is different. I couldn't possibly sanction criminal acts going online. I think speech, people should be able to say exactly what they want. But the trouble is, in the ideal world, like say Twitter wouldn't have such stringent terms of service. It would say, that's the point of the block button, is that people should be able to say whatever they want, and if you don't like it, just block them, and that's it, and that's fine. And they've still got their freedom of speech. They're still saying what they want to say.
And but you never have to hear or see it.
Well, people make this mistake all the time. If you block someone on Twitter, you're not damaging their freedom of speech. I mean, that's like saying that I'm depriving Dan Brown of his freedom of speech by not reading his novels.
Yeah.
You're free to go off. Part of freedom of speech is the freedom not to have to listen to what idiots have to say.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually Dan Brown has written a question. Why doesn't Andrew read any of my novels, he asks.
Actually, I have read Angels and Demons, and I have read The Da Vinci Code, so back off, bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've done that. Cool. I've done it. And I didn't like them.
He says sorry in the chat.
Right. Yeah, but I didn't like them. That's why I'm not going to carry on.
He said he saw your Yelp review. How fucking dare you?
Oh, God, he's so expositional. Anyway, so look, so ideally, when you have these sort of arbitrary terms of service that the internet providers have,
sure.
It means that it ends up becoming politicized invariably. I mean, as you know, in Silicon Valley, it's dominated by people who have this woke mindset. This is another reason why it's so important. They hire thousands of people to monitor content, and those people have a particular political agenda. They don't even get the job if they don't share that political worldview. There are questions they ask to ensure that you have that political agenda. So invariably, it's going to impact on conservatives more than people on the left, and it does. And we know the evidence is in on that. Yeah. The whole shadow banning thing disproportionately affected people on the right. So what you need to do, get rid of all of that.
I got hit with the shadow ban as well.
Right, there we go. I mean,
even though I'm fucking liberal left. Like, what the fuck was that about? How dare you? Don't you know what camp I'm part of?
They don't know what left and right really means anymore. So
there you go.
That's what you need. You need, the block button guarantees free speech, right? Because you should be able to have a platform where anyone can say anything they want, and people are not obliged to listen. That's how it should work. And so I think that should happen. If, like, what your questioner was talking about was something like Gab. The idea of Gab was to set up a site where anyone could say absolutely anything they wanted. But then the mainstream media sort of made this idea, sort of colluded to create the impression that Gab was this neo-Nazi site, because the dodgy characters did migrate over there.
Sure.
But that also put like normal people off going over there as well. So then it does become polarized. And, I would love to see some kind of Bill of Rights or something, which means that these Silicon Valley tech giants have a freedom of speech responsibility, have some kind of, you can't claim to be a platform. And yet, whenever you're sued for what appears on your platform, say, "Well, no, we're not publishers." That's always their defense. We're not publishers. But if you are curating the material as they do, you are a publisher.
Yeah.
So you can't have it both ways. So I think there's
That's
real
a very
sort of
good point. Yeah, either you allow people to say what they like, and then you can say, "Well, listen, we absolutely have no editing power over people's thoughts or feelings or statements."
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So that would be my point. I'd like to see, I'd like to see them embrace freedom of speech properly. Trust that people aren't these sort of drones that just get influenced by fake news and Russian bots and things like that. And trust people to curate their own platforms and decide who and what they want to talk and listen to and talk about.
Got another quick question here, asking what the thoughts on Paul Singer, who's a billionaire Republican, trying to or buying massive amount of Twitter stock and attempting to oust Jack Dorsey.
I haven't heard of this, so I don't know.
No, did I? I didn't know about it until just now. But can shifts in ownership in platforms change social media? I mean, absolutely. That's like saying, does Murdoch have any say over what appears in his various media publications? Yeah, absolutely.
That's the problem. Is that who's ever running the corporation, if they impose their own political worldview onto their terms of service, then it's going to be a skewed platform, and it's not going to be full free speech, and that could be to the left or the right. I mean, there's a part that you get this. You've got very hyper partisan news programming in the US, and that's because of the people who own the channels. It's that simple. So I'd like to think that we can just let everyone speak and have their views and have the battle of ideas out in public.
What non-political comedic exploits would you like to explore yourself? Because obviously I'm sure you're writing other things than Titania and Jonathan Pye, and we've already sort of covered that anyway. So what areas of the world of humanity interest you beyond politics and the culture?
Well, I mean, a lot of the stand-up I've done isn't political. I mean, over the last few shows I've done have been political in basis because we've had things like Brexit. So I wrote 2 shows about Brexit, or at least based around that. And I've written a lot about Trump and the Conservatives because they've been in power. So it's good to have a go at those who are in power. But then I've got sections of my stand-up that are about family, although not really. My family, it's sort of like a fictionalized family that I've kind of created, or about just things that I've done or experiences that I've had, and those generally are not political. So there's plenty of stuff I do that's not politics based. The musicals I write aren't generally political. So the plays I write, the plays I've written for Radio 4 haven't been at all political or even comedic. So I've got sort of various outlets. I deal with the politics through the satire I do, but also through the articles I write for Spiked magazine, which is a political magazine. So I've got that outlet. I don't need everything to be politics. I'd drive myself insane if I was just doing that.
There's always room for a good knob gag. That's what I think.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
What was the Carlin?
I mean, look, bring George, us down to that level.
No, I mean, well, hey, listen, it wasn't even me. It was George Carlin, I think. He said, Carlin, who obviously had a huge amount to say about politics and about, culture wars and societal butting of heads. He always had an opinion, often, slightly askew from everyone else's, which was wonderful, or actually very moderate maybe in its outlook. But like you say, mock anyone who's in power, mock anyone who's got a loud voice, and let's pick the feelings apart. But he said, I think I don't want to fuck up the quote, but effectively, you don't have to be clever to laugh at a dick joke, but you have to be a fucking idiot not to, or something to that.
Okay.
And it's
okay.
true.
Exactly.
I mean, there's always room. Every now and then, we need to just laugh about, the more simpler elements of human existence.
Yeah, of course. So I mean, that's when I've done stand up in the past. I've got set pieces that are not political. Although I've been doing less stand up of late, and what with the virus, probably none at all. for the foreseeable.
Yeah, absolutely. At least not until the end of June or so. That's what's happened to my calendar. So,
All right.
I feel like, well, I mean, we're at the end of our hour, Andrew, unfortunately.
Wow.
But I actually feel like there's so much more I wish I could have talked to you about now that we've got the Titania McGrath out of the way. I'm always
I
like,
know.
now I want to get into the other shit. But I know that a lot of the listeners would love, would have hated me if I hadn't discussed your latest comedy creation or comedy character
So
with you.
it's because people ask me about it a lot, and I did an interview recently, and I said to them before, "Do you mind if we just don't talk about it? Can we just talk about the things?" And they said, "Yeah, but all these people have bought tickets to hear you." It was a live interview. Said all these people have bought tickets to hear you talk about it. So to be fair, I certainly don't begrudge. I don't mind talking about it. But if you want to talk about other things, origami, I mean, whatever, then I'm up for that. Anything I know something.
I definitely. Well, I was either going to say we can extend the conversation now, or if you haven't got anywhere to be, or if you do need to shoot off, which you're looking at your clock, which suggests to me you might need to go to another thing.
Well, two reasons. Because I've got this new Apple Watch that talks to me every now and then, so I was just making sure it's not going to say.
Hurry the fuck up, Andrew. That's what it's saying.
But I've got. It really annoys me actually. And then the only thing I was going to do is I was going to Skype my mother, who's in she's in Northern Ireland, and I was going to Skype her.
I mean, you should definitely do that. What I was going to suggest is why don't we arrange at some point in the maybe in a couple of months' time, in a few weeks. I'd love to get you on again, and we will talk everything except politics and culture wars.
So just knob gags.
Knob gags. It'll be an hour of knob gags.
Okay.
With Andrew and Jeff. That's what we're going to call the episode. An hour of knob gags with Andrew and Jeff. No, I'd love to know a little bit more about the process of your creative process. I'd like to know a little bit more about what shaped you as a man as well, and delve into that a little bit more, because I think that'd be very interesting to the listeners. You can
I might ask you questions as well. Can I pin you down on something?
You're more than welcome to. Yeah, I feel like I've lived my existence, at least for the last 2 years, as an incredibly open book, which sometimes has been to my benefit and my career's benefit, and sometimes it's been to its detriment.
You raise a really important point, because I felt this as well, because around sort of 6-7 years ago, I just decided I'm just going to be honest about what I think, right? And that's this knowing that could cause problems.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never been more commonly accused of dishonesty ever since I've just completely been open about what I think. It's so weird.
Yeah,
it's almost
even in friendships and relationships, personal friendships and relationships, people go like, "Wow, you're very direct and very honest, and I know exactly what you're feeling, but do you know what it is? Do you have to do that?"
I think there's a weird kind of narcissism that goes on. When people accuse you of dishonesty, what they're really saying is they cannot conceive the possibility that someone would disagree with them. And therefore, the only explanation for that must be dishonesty. It's actually a manifestation of egoism and narcissism.
It's also a kickback, I think, from what social media is, which is very much people presenting often very big concepts that everyone can get behind because they know they will, especially celebrities on those platforms. And then everyone going, "Yeah, man, yeah, absolutely." Everyone just agrees. It's this whole thing that everyone's always fucking happy on Instagram. Guaranteed at this precise moment in time, with this fucking virus, with everyone quarantined with their loved ones, with people wanting to bury their children in the back garden right now because they're driving them fucking insane. I guarantee everyone is not feeling positive or upbeat or lovely.
Oh, hey, you know when the lockdown in China was stopped, the day after they had a record number of people filing for divorce. People are driving each other nuts. Yeah, people are. We're not used to being confined with our loved ones.
Oh, this is the make or break for most relationships, and not just the romantic ones as well. Work relationships, familial relationships. Strangely, I think 36 years of existing couldn't rebuild the relationship between my father and I reasonably strongly, and yet Corona is the only thing that seems to be healing it. We've FaceTimed every 2 days. Every 2 days I've been FaceTiming my dad. Ridiculous. He's been calling me. What?
That's the other nice thing, is that actually people, friends and family and things, like I've found people getting in touch with me who haven't spoken to me for years, and I think largely out of boredom, because they've got very little else to do. But it's been there's quite a positive thing about that everyone is sort of connecting, and
absolutely.
Well, that's a way to put a positive spin on it. On an otherwise
look at that.
Situation.
Look, we wrapped it up in such a lovely, positive way. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, Andrew Doyle. A very,
Thanks for having
very
me.
talented and clearly very eloquent as well, gentlemen. Follow both his accounts. So go to @AndrewDoyle_com. That's on Twitter. Andrew Doyle, DOYLE _com is his personal account. So make sure you follow that one. And then also check out Titania McGrath, which is @Titania, as it sounds, TITANIA, McGrath, MCGRATH. Make sure you check out both of those accounts. Give him a follow. See what he's up to, and then when he eventually gets back on the road and that show goes back on the road, make sure you go and see it and watch this epic takedown of overt wokeness and the absolute fallacy that everyone is as positive as they profess to be, which they're not. Miserable bastards. Go cheer yourselves up, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew, thanks for joining us, man. Is there anything else you would like to plug as well? Obviously, the books. I'd love to know more about the. Tell me about the books. People can purchase one of them right now.
You can purchase. I said Titania wrote a book called "Woke: A Guide to Social Justice," which you can buy. I've got it here somewhere, I think.
Available on Amazon, I believe, right?
That's a biography of Pete Burns. But you can buy that as well.
It's basically the same book. Basically the same book.
I really like Pete Burns. Woke: A Guide to Social Justice is you can buy that. And then the new one is a children's book. She's written a book for kids called My First Little Book of Intersectional Activism, which should come out. I think it's aiming to come out around June.
Okay.
So you can't get that yet.
There we go. All right. So buy the first one. Check out for the second one. And Andrew Doyle, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
See you next time, brother.
Are we out?
Okay, yeah, there we go. I stopped recording the episode, but we're still streaming.
Right. Still
so chat's still here. I just wanted to say, I can stop the stream. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say thank you to them, and then I want to say thank you to you. Ladies and gents, thanks so much for. Why would he stop? Yeah, I see. He has questions. Why would he stop? I had to stop the podcast now because it's an hour. It's an hour in length. But we will get Andrew on in the future. I promise we'll make that happen so we can chat to him about other things than just his Titania McGrath and political writing. But thank you very much for joining me today on the show, guys. I'll see you tomorrow for a live broadcast from 3 to 8. It'll be more gaming, Call of Duty Modern Warfare with Ghost from the game. See you then. Take care, guys. Bye.